She was fired for being late, until the billionaire boss realized she saved his son. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Sterling Industries headquarters as Emma Chen rushed through the revolving doors, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was late, again, the third time this month, and she knew what that meant. The corporate policy was clear, almost cruel in its precision. 3 tardies in 30 days equaled automatic termination. No exceptions, no explanations required. Her reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls showed a woman who looked far more disheveled than she'd like. Her usually pristine button-down shirt was wrinkled, her hair hastily pulled into a bun, and there was a smudge of something, dirt maybe, on her sleeve. She tried to smooth everything down as the numbers climbed higher, each ding of the elevator a countdown to what she knew was coming. The executive floor was a different world from her usual department. Here, everything gleamed with wealth and power. The receptionist barely glanced up as Emma was ushered toward the corner office, where Marcus Sterling himself waited. The billionaire CEO rarely handled personnel matters personally, which made this summons all the more ominous. Ms. Chen. His voice was ice as she entered. Marcus Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. His tailored navy suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. "Do you know why you're here?" Emma's mouth went dry. "Yes, sir. I was late this morning." For the third time, he turned to face her, and his expression was carved from stone. "Our handbook is explicit. 3 tardies constitute grounds for immediate dismissal. I've built this company on discipline and accountability. When my employees can't even arrive on time, Mr. Sterling, if I could just explain." His hand rose, cutting her off. "I'm not interested in excuses, Ms. Chen. Traffic, alarm clocks, family emergencies, I've heard them all. The fact remains that you've demonstrated an inability to meet the basic requirements of employment here." Emma felt her eyes burning, but she refused to cry. Not here, not in front of him. She'd worked so hard to get this job, had put herself through night school while working 2 other positions, just to qualify for a role at Sterling Industries. And now it was ending like this, in a cold office with a man who couldn't see past his precious policies. "I understand," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus walked to his desk, pulling out what she recognized as termination paperwork. "Human Resources will process your final paycheck. Security will escort you." The office door burst open. A woman in a charcoal suit rushed in, her face pale with panic. "Mr. Sterling, we can't find Oliver. The school called. He never arrived this morning. His driver said he got out at the front entrance, but no one's seen him since. Security is reviewing cameras, and we've contacted—" Marcus's transformation was instantaneous. The cold corporate titan shattered, replaced by a terrified father. "What do you mean you can't find him? How long has he been missing? Have you called the police?" Emma's heart stopped. Oliver. The boy's name was Oliver. "Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, and something in her tone made both of them turn. "Is your son 8 years old? Brown hair, blue backpack with red straps?" Marcus's eyes widened. "Yes. Where is he? Do you know where Oliver is?" Emma's hands were shaking now, but not from fear for her job anymore. "He's safe. He's downstairs in the lobby cafe. That's why I was late this morning." The office fell into stunned silence. "I don't understand," Marcus said slowly, his voice barely controlled. "Explain, now." Emma took a breath, the memory of the morning flooding back. "I take the subway to work. This morning, around 7:30, I saw a young boy on the platform crying. He was alone, and he looked terrified. When I asked him what was wrong, he said he'd gotten separated from his driver at school, panicked, and ran. He'd wandered several blocks and somehow ended up at the subway station. He didn't have a phone, didn't know what to do." She watched Marcus's face as the words sank in, saw the color drain from his cheeks. "He told me his name was Oliver, and that his father worked at Sterling Industries. I knew I'd be late, but I couldn't just leave him there. I brought him here, bought him hot chocolate in the lobby cafe, and asked the barista to watch him while I came up. I was going to explain everything, but—" She gestured helplessly at the termination papers on his desk. Marcus moved so quickly his chair spun. He was past Emma and out the door before she could finish her sentence. the assistant scrambling to keep up. Emma stood alone in the vast office, her heart still racing, unsure whether she should follow or wait or simply leave. She chose to follow. By the time she reached the lobby, a small crowd had gathered. Marcus was on his knees on the cafe floor, his expensive suit forgotten as he wrapped his arms around a small boy wearing a blue jacket and clutching a red backpack. The child was crying, apologizing over and over, and Marcus was assuring him it was okay, he was safe, everything was fine now. Emma hung back watching the reunion from a distance. This wasn't her moment. She'd done what any decent person would do, and that was enough. She'd find another job somehow. The important thing was that Oliver was safe. That's her, Dad. Oliver's voice cut through the murmur of the gathering crowd. That's the nice lady who helped me. Marcus looked up, his eyes finding Emma across the lobby. Still holding his son's hand, he stood and walked over to her. Up close, she could see the moisture in his eyes, the way his jaw worked as he tried to control his emotions. Miss Chen, he said, his voice rough. Thank you. Thank you for bringing my son back to me. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Why didn't you just say something? He asked. When you arrived late, why didn't you tell me immediately? You said you didn't want to hear excuses, she replied simply. And technically, I was still late. Company policy is company policy. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Shame, maybe, or realization. He looked down at his son, then back at Emma, and for the first time since she'd entered his office, he seemed to really see her, not as a statistic or a policy violation, but as a person. As the person who'd saved his child. Oliver tugged on his father's sleeve. Dad, she bought me hot chocolate, and she told me jokes to make me stop crying. She said everything would be okay. The boy's eyes were wide and earnest. She was really nice to me, even though I was scared and being silly. You weren't being silly, Emma said gently, crouching down to Oliver's eye level. You were brave. It takes courage to ask for help when you're lost. Marcus watched this exchange, and Emma saw something break inside him. His carefully constructed walls, the armor he'd built over years of ruthless business decisions, crumbled in the face of his son's innocent gratitude. Company policy, he repeated quietly, almost to himself. Then louder, Miss Chen, I'd like to speak with you again. Upstairs, if you don't mind. After I make sure Oliver gets home safely with proper security this time. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't a command either. Emma nodded and watched as Marcus guided his son toward the private elevator, the boy looking back to wave at her with a small smile. An hour later, Emma found herself back in that corner office. But this time, everything was different. Marcus gestured to a chair across from his desk, an invitation, not a summons. He sat down heavily, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight it hadn't before. I've spent 20 years building this company, he began. I've created systems and policies designed to ensure excellence, efficiency, and accountability. I've believed that rules applied fairly to everyone were the mark of good leadership. He paused, staring at the termination papers still sitting on his desk. Today you showed me how foolish that thinking can be. Emma started to protest, but he held up a hand. You were late because you were saving my son. You sacrificed your job, your livelihood, because a child needed help, and I almost fired you without even listening to why. He shook his head. What kind of leader does that make me? What kind of company have I built if it can't distinguish between excuses and genuine acts of human decency? He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. My ex-wife left me 2 years ago because she said I'd become more machine than man. She said I'd forgotten what mattered, that I cared more about quarterly earnings than about Oliver's school play, more about efficiency metrics than about being present for my family. I told her she was wrong, that my work, my rules, my systems, they all mattered. They're what made me successful. He turned back to face her. But Oliver matters more than all of it, and you understood that without hesitation, without even knowing who he was. Marcus returned to his desk and, very deliberately, tore the termination papers in half. When Oliver got lost this morning, my first thought wasn't about how it happened or whose fault it was. My only thought was getting him back safely. You gave that to me. You gave me my son back. Miss Chen, I'm not going to fire you. Instead, I'm going to ask you to help me. I want you to join a new initiative I'm creating. A review committee to examine our policies and procedures to identify where rigid rules might be doing more harm than good. I want you to help me build a company that values both excellence and humanity. Would you be willing to do that?" Emma sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she was hearing. "Mr. Sterling, I'm just a junior analyst. I don't have the qualifications for something like that." "You have exactly the qualifications I need," he interrupted gently. "You have compassion, courage, and integrity. You proved that this morning when you chose to help a stranger's child, even though it meant risking everything you'd worked for." He smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. "Besides, my son thinks you're amazing, and he's an excellent judge of character. Better than his father, apparently." Emma felt tears finally escape, but they were different tears now. "I'd be honored, Mr. Sterling. Call me Marcus, please. And there's one more thing." He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "My ex-wife's number. I'm going to call her tonight and tell her what happened. I think she'd like to meet the person who reminded me what really matters. Maybe we can start rebuilding what I broke." As she left his office an hour later, her new role defined and her future suddenly bright, Emma felt as though she were floating. She had her job, a promotion, and the gratitude of a man who'd learned that sometimes the most important rules are the unwritten ones, the ones that tell us to help a frightened child, even when it costs us something. Behind his desk, Marcus picked up the phone. First he'd call his ex-wife, then he'd draft a company-wide memo about the incident, without naming Emma, at her request, explaining that Sterling Industries would be implementing a comprehensive review of all policies that didn't account for human circumstances. The tardiness policy would be the first to go. Oliver was safe. A good woman still had her job, and Marcus Sterling had received a lesson more valuable than any business school could teach: that true success isn't measured in profits or efficiency, but in the humanity we show to one another when it matters most.